All right, so before the break, we set up a couple more animations on our character, not good ones. We're under tight time constraints here, so just going through the process for the animation. But now along with walking around and waving, the stuff our character did the other day, there was a jump animation in there as well. We just didn't actually do anything with that. Our characters can also kick and punch now. So we need to bring that into our game. So I'll share my screen. Oh, and yes, I did go back and I'll leave that open. I did go back and replace all of that stuff that I accidentally deleted. Luckily, it wasn't much. It was an hour and a half while talking about it. So it didn't take too long to replace it, but even a small thing in a game, it seems a lot worse than accidentally deleting a Word document or something. Maybe not a spreadsheet. Spreadsheets can be very important and can get very extensive with important information. Those are kind of panicky deleting things. Deleting an entire database might be worse. There are worse things, that's for sure. But I put it back together so it's like where we stopped at. Let me check something. I might have forgot to delete something when I was I'm about to get back out of there. Okay. There was a slight bug in there. I was going to point at it here, so I wanted to make sure I didn't have a fix for it. Like always, there's more than one way to do that. But after I deleted it, we added the gateway in, so I did come in and put that in there. We have the mouse moving around to get camera controls, which is probably really jumpy on the Zoom video, but I didn't click the optimize for video button when I shared the screen. So, or we can move around. He starts walking, walk all over our space. It's global coordinates. I like the turn and move a little bit better myself. When we stop moving, he starts waving. This is kind of a bug. As long as I'm holding that over key, he's not moving down. He stays, it's like he's hovering. Or she, I guess it's a completely generic character. There's still a lot of details that need worked in, but that hovering is kind of strange. And then that's about the spot I deleted it after we did that. So I did do the rest of that stuff, add in the little gateway object that goes to the other scene. Which we did see in class how to do that. Goes to the other scene, and there's one over here too. So when we collide with it, it jumps to the other scene. When I sent out the example after class, I copied that stuff we did from the other file, the on collision enter, and we also have an on collision stay and an on collision exit, taking the same single parameter that we can grab all that information from. Enter is when it starts, stay, so when it starts, the whole time it's going on, and then exit is when it finishes. Those names aren't subtle about which part it is. Hopefully that all makes sense. Here's that little bug. I even pointed out where it was and said something about trying to fix it. And our movement, our character's walking on the ground, so we set our vertical speed to 0. So whenever we're pushing the keys, that takes precedence over the gravity, and gravity doesn't pull it down anymore. So a slight bug in there. We'll look at that. But we did some updating on the game. the character in particular. And this is where it's nice to have that separation. We did that thing that's generally considered better format, where we separate our logic from our graphics. And we do that by, instead of making our grabbing that asset, the model, and just dragging it in, then it becomes a game object on its own. But alternatively, instead of doing that, we can just create a completely empty object that there's nothing there but a transform. And then that default stuff that like the categorical layer and tags, so we can identify it. And then made our character thing, the one we drag in, we drag it over here and dropped it onto that empty object so that it becomes a child of that. So the logic, what the script is connected to, and the physics, the collisions, the script, and all of that processing stuff is connected to this empty object, and the graphics are sitting there separately. Come compile time, game engine compilers are usually set to a very high optimization level. So it's going to reorganize things and try to get the most efficient way possible. One of those things doing is little these parent-child relationships of multiple game objects like this. The compiler is going to be like, oh, well, this would be more efficient. These always go together, so it would be more efficient if they were just the same object. So the compiler will go ahead and do that at runtime. But when we're developing it, it makes a big difference because we have a better model now. I have to move pictures on my way. We just added 2 more animations to our model. So it's not just that initial scratch version and the final version that we need to worry about. Right? Along the way, we're going to make modifications and things are going to change. So here, originally we had 3 animations. I guess it's that one. And now we have the same thing with 5 animations. So there's going to be updates along the way of developing our game. Well, 5 is better than 3, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that one, which is no longer a reference here. So I'll delete it from up here as well, and then drag this in to be the new child of that parent object, so that it is essentially the same thing. We had the same animations, we just added to them. There's a couple other ways we could have done that. That's the quick, easy way, just replace it. And if that would have been our entire character, our entire game object, if they weren't separate, we would have had to redo the rigid body, the box collider, reattach the script, told our free look camera, I can't remember which one I used from them, told our free look camera what character to look at because we deleted the original one. We had to redo all of that. Animations go with graphics, so we do still need to adjust our add our animator back in, but we have the same animator already. So all we need to do is attach that to the right object and set up our animations. So some of these are going to need looped and some of them won't. So jumping, when we jump, I'll use the words bounce. We want to jump, not bounce, right? We want it to happen only one time. So that one doesn't need loop. Walking will probably need loop. Oh, kicking. In this case, we're probably not going to kick repeatedly. We'll just kick one time. Oh, from this side, I can see what's wrong with it. The foot should have turned sideways. I could tell there was something very off and I couldn't quite tell what it was earlier. Actually, there's quite a few things off in that. Needs a lot of work. But that foot being straight vertical is what's really throwing that off. But the steps were all we were worried about, really. Punching. Our character can punch. We're probably not going to do that repeatedly. Walking, that one we want to keep doing. We're going to keep walking. So by default, the loop is turned off and it's an external file, right? It's that FBX file. So there's a two-step process. We can edit it here, but we have to explicitly click the edit button. It's usually great. Everything's grayed out. So we have to say, okay, we want to edit the external file. And this editor is set up to work with an FBX file. So that's where all these options come from. Make sure when we go to walk, we're going to edit the walk file because all of those, the animations aren't separate, right? There was only one FBX file. So make sure walk's selected and we're going to loop that. Probably also want to loop wave. That way we keep waving. And it's an external file. So when we make the changes, we do have to hit apply to kind of pass them through. And now we can see, if I can find it on here. Oh yeah. So now the walking and looping are going to keep animating. If we go to our animator window, it still recognizes things by that name. We don't have any sort of punching or kicking in yet. Or drag those up so we can set transitions to them. But we replaced the animator object. It was the only thing in the graphics. And sometimes we can set that up different ways so we wouldn't necessarily even have to replace that. But that's the advantage that keeping the logic and the graphics separate are. There's an update, still a long way from any final versions, but we're able to quickly replace those graphics and it should behave the same way. Might need to make some adjustments on the animator, but I think it'll be okay. Is it running? Oh. Unassigned reference. Oh, yes. And since our animator was there over in our player object to get that animator over to our script, instead of going and looking up syntax, we just use what we knew. We know it's a game object. If we have a game object, so we can bring it in that way. If we have a game object, then we know we can get a component from it, and then it's in our script ready to work with. But that means it needs assigned here. So we made it public so that we can just drag that right over there. Oh, and I guess I didn't delete all of those debugging things. We're going to talk about debugging that in a little while, so I didn't need those in there. So now it'll hopefully work the same. Oh, I hope that was just the old messages that hadn't gone away. I don't think. Okay, yes. So whenever you fix stuff, make sure you hit that clear button sometimes, because they won't always go away. Uh-oh, we're not animating like we should be. That bug's still there. And somewhere along the way, our general character image started leaning forward. So that's something that might need fixed. So I think the problem is we were looking at the old walk animation, not the new one. So I'm going to select those that were already in here and delete them, and then drag in the new ones. What was that? Punch, kick, jump, walk. And I'll just set the walk as the default, just like we saw before. And we can go from walking to waving as our speed variable goes less than 0. And then we'll go back. So right click and make a transition back whenever our speed variable is bigger than 0. Let's see if that works now. Okay, waving, that's a good sign. And when we start walking or limping, it's just like before. I did those animations really quick. But there's this thing. That seems like kind of a bug, right? I have no idea how the character started leaning forward like that, but should be okay. We're going to deal with that flying thing, but before we do that, we also created that new world. And that one's even easier. Then, well, get the zoom profile pictures out of the way. Now we can set up a third level really quickly. So that quickly drawn scene, and usually you saw that went very, very quick. What I do is I'll make several of them really, really quick. It's just a starting point, like really quick. This desert one that I went with, that took like 45 seconds. I've done that a few times. The swamp took a little bit longer, but it didn't take long. We go in scenes, we should be able to make a new scene now. I'm gonna hit save, and now create a new scene, the spot that we messed up on the other day. I'll call this Hills, and just kind of make a third spot to go, which is the process we've seen. We have our image. So I'm just going to grab that, drag it in. That's probably good. Oh, wait. The material didn't come in though. That'll be fine. If you just set it as a color, it should. Oh, I know why. On this one, might as well address that. I'll go back to Blender. So Blender's still somewhat fresh on our minds. It's only been a couple minutes since it was closed. Had that background image, Blender is just referring to an external file. It didn't import that or anything, right? It's just a pointer to that external file. So in this case, we might need to make that FBX file. So export that as an FBX. Hills.fbx, and all we need is the mesh. There's no armature or animations or anything like this. Maybe other. Yeah, I'll just export that. I'm not completely sure if this is going to work or not. I haven't really tried it, but now with the correct file format, I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Delete it. So delete it from here. As an FBX file. Hopefully that material came in with it this time. Nope, it does not look like it did. So you can see that it doesn't, those pictures don't quite want to come in right with it. There's some extra steps, and which I guess is going to get complicated. I didn't realize that there was a bunch of complicated steps. It's been a minute since I used that type of background, unless I was doing texturing and things like that. Setting it up so that instead of showing those colors define layers. So like the green parts were 3 inches higher than the brown parts. So I'm just going to make this a solid color. That way it's not white. Oh, don't let that. Close that. Little menu thing go. That black actually looks kind of neat. I'm just going to change it to regular RGB. Or oh, not ambient. Sorry, I don't want to do anything fancy. I'm just going to make it RGB. I go, we'll pick some greenish color. That'll probably work. Actually, maybe I should go with something more tan, brownish, because our character is not going to stand out there. Gray, that'll look like a barren. Probably need some. Hopefully the character won't be too invisible here. But some random color instead of the fancy stuff, and then we can just use this Blender file. It's a lot easier that way. Sorry, there are a bunch of steps in getting those pictures in there that actually turn into something very, very complicated very quickly. And I didn't think about all those other steps. Now we can just drag that in and we should see something green. Why is that not green? Oh, that's not going to work. Maybe the default value is not what I thought it was. Is it a texture? Oh. Sorry. I guess I forgot what the default value was. I'm not sure how to get back to it. I'll just go with the white stuff instead. That'll work. It's gonna be a lot of trouble. Probably have something green, but it'll look like an Arctic environment. Yeah, we'll call it an Arctic environment for this example, because the color doesn't really relate to the steps that we want to look at here. So once again, drag those in, and then just like we saw before, it's an uneven surface. We want our character to match up to it. So if we add a component under physics, it's all our colliders, including a mesh collider, because all we really brought in was that mesh, the mesh of a cube that we shuffled around and made it look a little bit different. Then we can do the same things we did before. We go back to the scenes tab, maybe the desert. Yeah, save that one. I'll grab the player object and that camera and the gateway and copy those and paste them in. Paste. And see the character kind of all copied over the same way. Looks like it's referring to the right thing. The gateway's there. Where is everything? Oh, it's way down below. Let's move that up here somewhere. Oh, that'll be fine. Got the fake camera. So if we hit run, should be able to see this stuff. Notice that it's going from the main camera though. The mouse stuff's not doing anything. We're not zoomed in looking at our character. These free look cameras don't copy and paste very well. So you're much better off to just make a new one. What do we do? 7.4.3.21.10.5. So I'm going to delete that and just make a new one altogether. A new free look camera, in part as a reminder of how to set those up. So what's it going to follow? It's going to follow the player, and it's going to look at the player. And as we scroll down, the mouse inputs are okay. Usually with the orbits, I like to switch it to world space. That's just, I found that's a little bit easier to keep track of. Let's see, we're 8, there's like a 21, and 4 at 10, and 0.3 at 5. So just copied over those numbers that we had changed. You'll notice that if I right click on a component, I just typed over a couple. If I right click here at the top level, there's options to remove it or copy the whole thing. But like on parts of it, if I right click down here by in different values, so like the y-axis stuff, we can copy that, all of those over and paste them all at once. Because remember, this is one of those cases where the UI, it seems more directly related to the text file. So if we right click here on this section and copy and paste it, we're actually copying and pasting in the script. Let's see if that follows our character now. So now we got those controls back in. And walking's kind of the same. Yeah, this one has a bunch of edges and stuff. Did it very quickly and was talking the whole time. So there's a lot of places the character gets stuck on this world. But another place to walk around and that process for putting these things together to start with. Let's move that down. So he's close to the ground, and move this down so that our player can actually collide with it. And it's 3 dimensions, so sometimes you have to be careful and look at different angles to make sure things are as close as you think they are. Because since it's going to look bigger when things are closer to the view we're at, it might throw you off from just one angle of making sure that those things are as close together as they look like. The perspective changes with the depth. So a third world, so then we can just add that into our thing. So really just a quick pass on this. So I guess we can start in the desert. And if we're in the desert, we go to the swamp. And then if we're in the swamp, we want to go to the hills. And then we can just copy and paste this to make a nice circle, I guess, in this case. Paste that in. And if we are in the hills, we'll go to the desert. Wait, that made a nice little recap on all that stuff. Just our basic putting our world together, switching between levels, moving around the scene, getting the camera to follow us. Check for typos. And remember, copy and paste is your friend. That was a big, long instruction. 2 lines with the curly brace afterwards. Scene, all these great big words, but we only changed 2 words in it. So a great situation for copy and paste. So now if we hit run, we should be able to cycle through all the different worlds. If we walk into that sphere, goes to the desert, and walk into the gateway here, we go over here. Oh, there's a little bug in the swamp. We didn't actually replace the graphics in the swamp yet. So I'm just going to copy it from here because we already set up the animator and everything. So notice every one of our scenes is a new thing and a new scene altogether. Just because we have something called player object in every scene does not mean it's the same thing. Where's that at? In swamp. And yes, save. And like we saw the other day, don't ignore do you want to save messages? So I'll delete this one, paste this in, and then I'm just going to grab that and drag it to be a child of the player object. So if there's a blue line, that means it's going to insert it underneath it. To actually make it a child, we want just that object highlighted with nothing underneath it. With no line showing where it would insert it. Now we should have a character here. Oh, yes, that same thing earlier. our script needs a reference to that. So it kind of told us what it was, where it was at. This one was a little more cryptic. Oh, there's that nice Unity message. You probably need to assign the graphics variable of the player script in the inspector. Unity does have those really nice tips in their error messages that we usually don't see in programming. Oh. That looks kind of weird, doesn't it? If I highlight this, well, the little arrows are on, so I should be able to see where it's at. Ah, so there's our game object, but the image for it ended up way over here. And notice they each have their own transform data. The game object has its transform data, and that's the position we want to use. And then its child has its own transform data. And this is relative to the parent. So we want to set that to 0, 0, 0. So that way they're at the same place. Because again, our game logic and graphics are separated, so our camera is looking at the empty thing, not at the model itself. Okay, so images work there. Ah, this might be a problem. Hills couldn't be loaded because it has not been added to the build settings. So this is the error I was wanting to see the other day and having trouble throwing. And we get that nice little Unity tip again. To add a scene to build settings, use the menu File - Build Settings. So I'm going to go over to that scene. Let's save this one. And once we're over in this scene, on the player or something. If we go to File and Build Settings, here's the scenes we have. We have the desert and the swamp. Oh, and then the only button we have is Add Open Scene. I guess I could have went here first and then had to go back and navigate to the other scene, because to add a scene, we have to be looking at it. It has to be the one that's currently open. So now we should be able to navigate between all three of them. So just a little bit of expansion, recap, review on those core components. So we can go from the hills to the desert to the swamp, and from the swamp to this other hill, white space. Yeah, definitely not. I would have normally just kind of scrapped that world. Just done a bunch real quick, but we went through the process. That's the important part. It's a quick process, and I usually do them really quick and then only keep the good ones. Get like 5 together and then pick and choose from those. Oh, usually a laptop sitting right there. So I knock stuff down and it's like, uh-oh, that's not good, but just paper today. So what time is it? 3:07. So one other thing I want to address, I'll do it over in the desert. That'll work. Where's the player? And again, F zooms in on the thing that's selected in the hierarchy. So we had that issue of when we started moving, it was okay. He's a little above the ground. You can probably adjust that quickly by fixing the box glider. So just the debugging steps. I'll walk through all of them. Let's walk through the debugging steps, because I wanted to spend about 5 minutes on this, 10 minutes. So looks like he's standing on the ground as he starts walking. he might be hovering a little above the ground anyway. So maybe he needs to come down a little. This is the big bug. If we're holding controls, it's like he flies. Or is this a big steep one? Well, we can see it. He's just up there above the ground until I let go of the control. So that's the big bug. But this one's probably quicker to fix. We can make him a little lower in the ground. Just select the player, go over to box collider, and it's based off a collision, so his feet are too far above the ground. So I'll just drag the bottom of the box upward a little so that it looks like his feet sit on the ground. And our rule of thumb in programming is you always want to fix one bug at a time, right? Even if while you're playing through it, you're going to probably collect a list of bugs that need addressed, but always address one at a time because things are very connected. Whoops. That same thing would need fixed there. But they're separate players, so it'd be good to go back and address everything here and then just copy those changes over. So it looks like he's better on the ground more. That flying issue is strange. So that's probably the next thing to address. I'd mentioned it the other day. Did anybody give it a try to fix that? Or, well, let me go through the whole process. Before we move on to the next one, fix one bug at a time. So we know what fixed that in the desert. So if we go over to the hills, I guess save that, go to the player object, edit our box collider, and ideally you probably would have grabbed some numbers there so that you could just copy that, whatever that number was, but it was too small. So we just need his feet to sink down a little closer to the ground. That's probably good. In the swamp, save that. So the player, edit the box collider and bring it up a little bit past his feet. There we go. Save that. And the debugging process. So fix one bug at a time, and before you forget what you did, go through and fix it everywhere. Or get it all working in one scene, and then before you do the copy and paste to the other, would be a viable option. In our case here, we're restricted for time in a classroom, so I wanted to make sure and review how to create scenes and put characters in them and stuff more than once, and review that camera stuff more than once. So I mentioned, now on to that big bug. I mentioned trying to fix it. Did anybody give it a try? Come up with anything that would fix that? I assume the silence means no. It's busy, it's finals week, right? There's a lot of stuff to do. So this is what's causing the problem. When we go over here, it's like, we'll see the bug and be like, okay, why is it not going down? Well, here's our direction. And our direction is, our vertical direction is set to 0. It's like, okay, we need to fix that. And there's an issue here that I decided to stretch this out for a moment because I figure there's a good chance when you go to fix bugs, you're going to jump in there and change code as quick as you can and try to get it fixed quickly instead of stepping away from the machine and taking a little bit of time, maybe jotting down notes, drawing pictures and stuff to think through the process thoroughly. Or in other words, you're a normal human. So you're going to jump over to the code, try to narrow down, thinking, okay, there's one thing, you got to fix that quickly. Oh, it's probably this number, change it, rerun it. It's what we do. It's what normal humans do, right? We're not going to spend a whole bunch of time thinking through all those interactions. So let's change this number. Okay, he's not going down, so let's make him go down. Maybe 1.0 floating point number. Okay, so now there's a downward downward direction. Before I run this, does anybody think they see what might be a problem with just changing that number? No thoughts on what might be a problem there? How about this line? This vector is the direction we're going to face. So if it has a downward component to it, which direction is our character going to face? Once it compiles, then we can see it directly. Because this is how this is the, the slow, logical, thoughtful process is probably the better one, but we're real humans. We're not going to do that. We're going to jump over to our code and try to make adjustments as quick as we can. And well, it wasn't going down, so let's add a downward component. And that gives us a different issue altogether. That makes it even worse than what it was. Oh, well, when we move, it's fine. But adding in a downward component gives us a problem. So then we, back to the drawing board. Just the general debugging process, where it's like, okay, that did make him go down, but that made him face downward. So that's not the right solution. But that still seems like the right idea, doesn't it? We need that downward component in order to bring our character back down. So the problem was that we turn and face the direction we say to go. So another solution might be to, let's try adding a downward component afterwards. So we have our direction vector. We turn and face that direction, and then we move in that direction. So in between the two, we can modify that direction vector. So let's turn and face it, and then our direction is vectored at it. So there's a .x, .y, and .z involved, with y being our vertical. So we can take that and let's add some negative stuff here. We want to work with floating point numbers in Unity. Save those 32 bits because we haven't done much at all, and there's already a bunch of code added up on us. So saving 32 bits still makes a difference, even as big as processors have gotten. Now let's give that a run. Well, that's better, right? It doesn't fall flat on his face. We start moving. Looks like he's moving a little slower. It's probably all jumpy in the Zoom call and kind of hard to tell right on the Zoom call. But in part, I knew he was going to move slower. Oh, he didn't fly. If y'all could see that. So that's all we need to do with that component. And yeah, the normal debugging process. Oh, I guess we could see from that angle, it wasn't quite fast enough, but it caused something else to happen. It's probably hard to tell on the Zoom call, but he is moving slower because it's trying to move downward as well and pushing against that bottom, and then there's physics involved. So then pushing harder into the ground means there's going to be more friction as we move that direction. You can see it rubbing your hands together, right? And lightly rub your hands across the surface, or you can push really hard, and that's what's happening. So really, when we do stuff like this, we should probably increase the speed. From that last angle, it looked like he didn't quite fall as quickly as the ground dropped off, but increasing the speed more would slow us down more. So as we increase our speed this way, we probably might want to increase our speed overall. As we add more downward, that's going to create more force and more friction and slow us down. So we might want to counter that by some other speed here, which to get the exact number involves the Pythagorean theorem. So if you haven't had a trigonometry class, vector, we find those with the Pythagorean theorem, which does expand immediately up to any number of dimensions. You're probably used to the Pythagorean theorem, or you first learned it in like elementary school as a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And for games here, when we were doing 2D, it made a lot more sense to call those x and y instead of a and b. A squared, x squared plus y squared equals r squared, just change the letters. But this does go up to any number of dimensions. It does scale up. So if we're in 3 dimensions, x squared plus y squared plus z squared equals r squared. Or if we're in 4 dimensions, I'll just add time in there. Space time makes a little more sense. Visualize. It's still something we can visualize if we consider space and time. X squared plus y squared plus z squared plus t squared equals r squared. So the Pythagorean theorem does hold for however many dimensions we're working in. So in 3 dimensions, we just need that z in there. And then that is what you would need to counter that with. So we want the same magnitude to avoid our speed changing. And the magnitude is the result of the Pythagorean theorem. So magnitude squared is x squared plus y squared plus z squared. So if we add something here, it's going to affect that. So you can use the Pythagorean theorem to get backwards that way, or just some quick trial and error. Because maybe if we want to go down faster and like go up to 10, it should be very noticeable that it's different here. And just, I guess, a reminder about the debugging process, because this course didn't have a lot of prerequisites to it. This is the introduction one. So you might not have extensive experience with debugging yet. If you're getting into anything with programming, you will get extensive experience debugging stuff very quickly. But yeah, now with like 10 in that downward component, it's too much friction for him to move. So we can really see it there. So we just, once we hone in on a number, like maybe negative 2.3. Bring him down kind of quick. Hopefully not so much friction that we can't move anymore. Oh, I meant to stop 2 minutes ago. So now it's moving, but slower than our original speed that we honed in on. But it's a public speed, so we can find that variable, adjust that variable as it goes. So we increase this by 2, so let's try increasing this by 2, see what happens. That might be a little bit better. We're not super refined here. Usually those things would correspond to the animations. The speed we move needs to match the speed we're walking at. But he doesn't fly anymore. And just the general idea of debugging. Obviously, the best process is to step away from the keyboard and think the process through very thoroughly. But we're humans. We don't do that. We're like, oh, there's a problem. Got to fix it immediately. Jump over here. You see that number. And then we saw that just, well, then we turned and faced the downward direction as well. So we have to choose our horizontal direction. Then we turn and face. And then we adjust our downward direction to make sure we don't fly when we walk over a ledge. And then finally we move. So that part that's always important in programming, the order matters, and it matters a lot. I left that bug because that is in there, because that makes a great example of how important order matters. The only place this could possibly fit in the sequence is between when we turn and face there and when we actually move in that direction, which we want to happen almost instantly. So we don't have much time to work that in there. But hopefully that'll give you all some stuff to start messing around with. At a point you can get in there and try things and not copy and paste things, like actually try from the stuff you know to make things happen. There's lots of ways to do things. And so taking this in a classroom, we're not rushing through a tutorial, copying and pasting. We want to understand the things we're doing so that we can duplicate them in different situations. I should say replicate them in different situations, modify them, and most importantly, debug them when they don't work for our particular situation. Because if all you do is copy and paste from an example, if it doesn't work, can you really debug it when there's a problem? So hopefully that stuff we went over is kind of making sense so that you can duplicate some of those. I meant to stop a couple minutes ago to leave an hour and a half of lab time today. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap up? Okay, I assume the silence means no questions then. So as always, text messages and Ivy Learn messages make noise on my phone. We're coming on the end of the semester, so I want to make sure there's plenty of time to get things done. As always, I will be sitting here till 3:50 ready to answer a question. I do not have a meeting today, so if you send me a message, I can jump back on Zoom in a couple seconds time. Otherwise, you all have a great weekend, and I will see you on Monday, and we'll do something with that game. We'll bring in an opponent and kick them with that weird animation, I guess. Have a good weekend.
All right, you too. I'll see you, Chris.
See ya.